Live from the UK, broadcasting around the world, you're listening to Talking Minaret, discussing matters that affect you, streaming to the world and beyond.
Hello everyone, welcome to Talking Minaret. Let's talk first about the escalation in Marib, which is in Yemen, and the project for Yemeni fragmentation, which has been on the books for America for a while now, as part of the Greater Middle East Initiative. Some of you would have heard residents in the Yemeni province of Marib are bracing for a mass displacement due to war. The Houthis took control of Mount Hilan overlooking the city. They have also announced that Sana'a International Airport was closed to the UN due to fuel shortages. So there have been several issues. The issue of the Houthi attacks on Saudi and their attack on Marib, the attack that targeted Riyadh. So let's go into the backdrop of this, what's behind this. This all coincided with Washington's attacks against Saudi and on bin Salman. It's not been long since the return of US Special Envoy for Yemen, Tim Lenderking, from his visit to Saudi, where he had meetings with the Saudi Defense and Foreign Affairs Ministers in the presence of United Nations Security Council Special Envoy for Yemen. This shows that America is working towards a final solution to the war in Yemen and to steer it towards a settlement dividing Yemen. This maneuver was then found out by the Houthis, who launched their attack on Marib in order to guarantee them a share in the energy revenue. Marib is situated about 75 miles east of the Yemeni capital Sana'a. It is oil rich and the only northern province completely under the control of the forces of the Hadi government. It is a strategic city situated to the south of the oil-rich Al Jauf and hosts the largest refinery in Yemen and the largest power station on which Sana'a depends for 50% of its energy needs. The Houthis are taking advantage of the American decision to end the support to the Saudi alliance in order to weaken the government of Hadi and divide Yemen between them, i.e. the Houthis get the north and the Transitional Council get the south. They have had a lot of attacks on Marib into the strategic Dahida mountains in order to tighten their grip on the areas of Safir and Al-Alam, where the oil and natural gas wells are. What was also revealing was the comment of President and Commander of the Southern Transitional Council Al-Zubaydi that the process of dividing Yemen has begun. He said the fact that it would be possible to change the political scene by depriving the government of Hadi of its last major pieces of the land in North Yemen, and this could lead to a situation where the Southern Transitional Council would be dominating the south to a great extent, and the Houthis controlling most of the north. This can only lead to marginalizing the Saudi role, especially now that Biden has now appointed a delegate to oversee the Yemeni issue, and the US has suspended military support to Saudi in her war in Yemen. In addition to this are the channels America has generated to contact the Houthis directly instead of going through Saudi. So the conclusion is the expansion on dominance of the Houthis over the most important positions of the so-called legitimate government to enhance their negotiating position, marginalizing the president to the benefit of the STC and enabling them to acquire the components of a state in the north by seizing control of the energy resources or even threatening them. This will allow the Houthis to negotiate over the energy resources and to gain a trump card for the negotiations. Biden's even refused to label the Houthis as a terrorist organization, and that explains why Hassan Nasrallah said the Houthis are on the verge of achieving a magnificent victory. As for the so-called legitimate government with Hadi, there's a rift between Hadi and the STC. Hadi has been taking decisions in isolation of the cabinet, such as appointing senior civil servants without prior consultation. And the president of the STC, Al-Zubaydi, called for the STC's right to have a kind of a presence in all final negotiations with the Saudis. He also warned that the Yemeni issues would not be resolved if the voice of the South were overlooked. Muslims need to look at this from the angle of the Islamic Aqidah and the Sharia that puts on them the fraud of exposing these plots and plans of the kuffar and the traitors. It also forbids them from drifting towards killing each other and dividing even further, like the Sykes-Picot Agreement wasn't enough for us. In the other neck of the woods, you would have read on the news in regards to officials from United States and Israel meeting to discuss the two countries' security strategies in the Middle East, as well as the Biden administration's plan to re-engage diplomacy with Iran on nuclear weapons. We talked a bit about this on the last podcast, about the whole downsizing of Iran's role. The former nuclear agreement was designed during Obama's time within the framework of dismantling the region on sectarian grounds. It was engineered in a way to evoke a kind of nervousness and like an anxiety of the Saudis and the Israelis, with the aim of generating like a common enemy. So the common Saudi-Israeli interests that justified alliance normalization, of which we can see the fruits of now. We've mentioned this on previous podcasts about the whole Iranian scarecrow, kind of like a common enemy. Israel has given a free rein to strike Iranian forces and her affiliated militias in Syria to lure Iran into a reaction against Saudi via the Yemeni Houthi militia, thus paving the way for the Arab-Israeli reaction with the whole normalizations, etc. What's interesting is that Biden said that if Israel had not existed, the United States would have invented Israel. And what people must understand now, and to be crystal clear, is that Israel is the largest power of the United States in the Middle East. And I would say to my friends, when they tell you these things, I would say, imagine our condition in the world if there was no Israel. How many warships there would be, how many soldiers will be deployed, or words to that effect. So Israel represents an advanced military base for him. I saw an interesting video about this by Noam Chomsky on this, in fact on YouTube, if you just search for that. Its presence ensures the normalization process and to restructure the Iraqi, Syrian, Lebanese and Yemeni regimes according to the Greater Middle East Initiative. Biden harnessed the Iranian scarecrow and the Khashoggi assassination to twist bin Salman's arm, as well as the Yemeni issue, which, should he fail to resolve, would affect his ability to inherit the throne. This was reflected in the statement of the deputy chairman of the AKP in Turkey, Yasin Aktay, who commented, "It is sad that the issue of Jamal Khashoggi has turned into a trump card in the hand of the US against Saudi." In the other neck of the woods in Iraq, America took the opportunity to strike the Iraqi PMF through the Iraqi-Syrian borders in the region of Bukamal in order to deter Iran and her proxies from impacting on the Sinjar Agreement, which was designed to strip Iran of the strategic position in northern Iraq on the Syrian borders. It was also designed to exert pressure on the PMF, who have rejected the agreement. They are also continuing to resist their integration within the Iraqi forces under the leadership of al-Kadhimi and to attack the military bases hosting US soldiers in an attempt to dissuade al-Kadhimi from implementing what he had pledged to America regarding imposing the sovereignty of the law, restricting the possessions of weapons to the state. Through these groups, Iran wants to obtain a bargaining chip in its negotiations with the US over its functional role, which has started to be corroded during the process of normalization. Remember, we mentioned in previous podcasts, Iran's been used as a scarecrow figure, a common enemy, if you will. But that role, that functional role, is being eroded. Things are gathering momentum. They are close to establishing a defense and security alliance, especially since that recent attack on the Israeli cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman. This is what Benny Gantz stated following the talks he had with the Jordanian King Abdullah II. He wants to play a role that would bring him closer to the new administration and restore the support to the Gulf states. On the topic of Jordan, on 13th of March, there was a shortage of oxygen supplies in the intensive care unit in Al Salt New Hospital in Jordan, causing the death of 7 patients. This is significant. The reason being is this: soon after the incident, King Abdullah II rushed angrily in the hospital to the hospital wearing his military uniform. There's videos of this on YouTube. The Prime Minister announced the dismissal of the Health Minister, and they called for a session of the lower house and the Senate to debate. It is clear that the strong reaction of the regime reflects the political situation for the king and his crown prince. This is why the Jordanian regime swiftly suspended the hospital directors and charged them with causing the deaths. The tense atmosphere is set to weaken the royal institution and contribute to the endeavour to reshape the Jordanian regime. And most likely is linked to the issue of Palestine, downsizing Iran's role, settling the Syrian issue. Here's the interesting bit. Although the Salt Hospital incident was caused by the government's negligence, the US Embassy's message to its citizens a day before the incident warned them against visiting several Jordanian cities, including Al Salt, under the pretext of crime and terrorism. That can't be a coincidence. This is also set to turn the incident into a potent ammunition between the opposition forces and the palace. The so-called opposition against the king have called for a demonstration. On 24th of March, they took advantage of the Biden administration's intention to exert pressure on the regimes. In the backdrop of all this, you had the imposing of economic restrictions on the masses, exploiting COVID-19 to extend the lockdown. You had depriving the masses of the Friday Salah and the king's harassment of his brothers Hamza and Hashim, and marginalising his brothers Ali and Faisal, and showing off his son, the crown prince, and projecting him in the media, and dismissing his brother from his post as senior secretary at the Royal Hashemite Court. And also him meeting the Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz, his refusal to meet Netanyahu, who needed his backing in his electoral campaign. All this falls within the context of challenges the king is facing, and it's all linked to the new administration of the US. It aims to arrange negotiations with the participation of a Palestinian authority representing all the factions, the Palestinian elections, the Jordanian participation, which would absorb consequences of a final solution by which King Abdullah is attempting to pass on the throne to his son. As for the Palestinian refugees in Jordan, King Abdullah is bargaining with the US administration on this to secure his son's succession to the throne, and he is attempting to remove the domestic obstacles facing his project by restructuring the army, security services, and the intelligence agency. The tension between Jordan and Israel falls under the climate in which the king is struggling to market his successor, Prince Hussein, to validate the Hashemite custodianship over the sacred areas in the city of Al-Quds, which is the deal between Jordanian leadership with Benny Gantz. And then we had Netanyahu's decision to prevent the crown prince from visiting Al-Aqsa Masjid on the night of Al-Isra. This then deprives him of the chance to market himself as a custodian of the holy precincts. This was viewed as a kind of a punishment by Netanyahu to King Abdullah, who hosted his rival Gantz. Okay, so you've had an update on the Yemen division, the diminishing role of the Iranian scarecrow, and the Jordanian government restructuring. We should have another podcast out next week. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.